Mr. Chair, we are now live.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Town of Ajax Heritage Advisory Committee meeting for Wednesday, November 3rd, 2021. This meeting is being held electronically and live streamed on the internet. All staff and committee members are participating by phone or video. All regular practices and procedures of the committee continue to apply during these electronic meetings. If we encounter any technical difficulties, we may take a brief recess while they are resolved. Thank you for your patience, and we will now proceed with the meeting. So first off, are there any conflicts of interest on committee members with any of the items to be discussed this evening? Okay, I don't see anyone raising their hand for that, so thank you very much. And the next item is, I'm going to look to someone to motion to adopt the minutes from our previous meeting, which was a little while ago, September 8th, 2021. So do we have a motion to adopt those minutes? Oh, perfect. Thanks, Stephen, and seconded by Jeff. Sorry. Perfect. All in favor? Okay, very well. Motion is carried. We will now move on to the items for discussion for tonight. And I believe we've got a new guest with us today. Sarah from, who's the Chief Librarian and Executive Officer, is going to be giving us a little update on archive services. So over to you, Sarah.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here today. Again, my name is Sarah Vaisler and I'm with the Ajax Public Library. And today I'm going to be doing a presentation on a proposed transfer of the archives services. For those photo enthusiasts in the room, I will just share with you that this photo is from the 1950s of the Ajax industrial area. And there are a number of businesses listed there, including Zellers and Bailey Engineering. So just for your interest, I'll share with you that detail. In February 2010, Ajax Council formally established the Ajax Archives with a mandate of collecting and preserving archival material, which illustrates or documents the growth and development of the town of Ajax. Now, the archive includes photos, records, artifacts, and that responsibility of managing and maintaining the archives was put into the legislative and information services within the town. In 2021, staff turnover within that department sparked a dialogue between the town and the library to determine whether there were benefits of this collection being managed by the library. And upon completing some research and considering, we found that there's an industry trend heading towards GLAM models. And GLAM stands for galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. These institutions share like-minded mandates, acting as a community hub, being a place for people to gather, learn, and socialize, which ultimately leads to enriched and more vibrant communities. Locally, there are some examples to be found. For example, Clarington Public Library recently amalgamated with Clarington Museums in 2019 and now operate under one umbrella. Whitby Public Library, when they opened their main library branch a number of years ago in downtown, included the transfer of the entire town's archives to the library, and they installed a separate archival room. Up in Scugog in Port Perry, their main branch, when they opened, included a gallery, which is entirely serviced by the library staff. So as you can see, moving archives into the umbrella of library services is not new within the industry, and these are just a few local examples of successful models. Additionally, archives is a natural fit within the library. The library already retains a local history collection, and we are well positioned to acquire, assess, catalog, maintain, and provide access to archival records, as this mirrors our business model in handling books and research materials. With 3 distinct locations across Ajax, we can showcase different elements of this collection through curated displays. And finally, the library is very competent in providing reference and research services and would be able to provide extended hours and access to this service, as the library's regularly operating hours are 7 days a week and include evenings. For these reasons, a transfer would result in a service level enhancement. Presently, the archives are stored in the basement of the town hall, and curated displays are located at a number of town facilities. In looking at what would need to be transferred as part of this arrangement, the transfer of ownership would include the photo collections, artifacts, old newspapers, and audio and videotapes. But it would not include corporate documents that the town needs to hang on to for their business purposes. For example, historical bylaws or minutes. There are a number of services that the library provide should this proposed transfer be accepted. In addition to just managing the archives itself, we would try to increase and create more access for the general public. Increased access could take the place of increasing digitization. We would also manage all of the displays across the town facilities, the largest being within Town Hall near the doors to council chambers. While we would maintain storage in the town hall basement, we would be responsible for ensuring that the storage, protection, and preservation of those materials is held up to professional standards. Similarly, we would ensure that all reference services are directed to library and library staff. Lastly, we believe that there are a tremendous amount of educational and outreach opportunities related to the town's history. Examples that staff have come up with is developing a portable kit where we could bring artifacts and archives and photos into classrooms in protected mobile display cases. These mobile display cases are currently being used by institutions like the ROM when circulating historical artifacts. So let's just look at a sample of some of the objects and our collections. So there are large machinery, such as a graphotype, a metal embossing machine, historical newspapers and other fragile papers. We have textiles, such as the scarf from a Dill shift worker. And then there are smaller objects and machines, such as this Underwood typewriter. And there are even fun pieces like old milk containers. Last but definitely not least are the extensive collections and objects relating to the Dill munitions plant. As part of considering this transfer, of course, we are conducting consultation. We have met with the senior town management staff. Of course, we are meeting with you, the Heritage Advisory Committee, the Veterans Association, as well as members of council. In looking at the next steps for this transfer, in order to make this transfer a success, council would need to approve a business case, as there are additional resources needed in order for the library to facilitate this service. Should that business case be approved during the February 2020 budget deliberations, in the spring of 2022, we would immediately begin to recruit an archivist and come to an agreement with the town on what this transfer of ownership truly entails. During the summer and fall, we would plan to complete a detailed inventory. While there is an inventory list in existence right now, we would be looking to bring in a professional archivist to manage, maintain, and protect this data. And so we need to have an understanding of every piece of documentation in this collection. During this time, we would also set up a comprehensive plan, a plan that both establishes how to preserve the collection and maintain it to the quality that it is in right now, as well as how do we capture today's history to make sure that we are leaving a legacy for future generations. We do hope that if this plan goes forward, we would have completed the indexing and cataloging of the entirety of the collection and integrated into the library's current catalog, making the library's online catalog a one-stop shop for all of your local history research needs. That is the end of my presentation, but I am quite happy to answer any questions you may have about this transfer.
Yes, go ahead, Pam.
Sounds great. I'm just stuck on one phrase that you use, transfer of ownership. What does that exactly mean, transfer of ownership? Because I would assume at this point, all of the material that's in the archives belongs to the town, which means it belongs to the people of the town of Ajax. So what does transfer of ownership actually mean?
The library and the town are distinct organizations under the Public Libraries Act. And so the transfer of ownership would actually mean that the entire collections and its contents, that ownership and the rights of the collection are safely transferred to the library. This would allow the library to manage that to the professional standards of archival management. So it does mean literally what that says is that management and the ownership would be transferred to the library legally.
Yes, go ahead, Pam.
So follow up on that. So when the management of the library at some point, that means that all decisions regarding the material that is in that collection then lies with the management of the library. So if there is a decision to transfer it outside of Pickering or discard of certain items or whatever, that no longer becomes up for conversation with the town council. Is that true?
That is true. Now, part of the proposal that we are putting in front of council includes the recruitment of a part-time archivist. An archivist is a professionally trained individual understanding how both to accession items into the collection, as well as the professional requirements in deaccessioning items. So when you deaccession an item, we are looking at the provenance of that material. So to determine if the person who formerly owned that, should we choose to no longer own it, would like to retain it back. And then there are a number of steps, including donating it to like-minded organizations that would have to be done in order to deaccession that material. But I agree with you that because we care for this collection so much, it is crucial and imperative that a professional comes in and can hold us to that professional standard.
Go ahead, Pam.
Sorry, but the decision then lies with that archivist and the library. It is no longer a discussion with the town or the council regarding future decisions that may need to be made regarding the collection.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I would say, you know, to our counselor that needs to be a consideration, or whether that become part of an agreement or whatever, because it sounds great right now, but 20 years from now, how do you know who's in place making those decisions? That's all. Thanks.
I'm just writing a note. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Any other questions? Yes, go ahead, Neil.
On a purely pragmatic point of view, who do we contact to get material out of the archives now?
Right now, you would be contacting the Legislative and Information Services. And that would be the Records and FOI Coordinator.
Who's that?
That maybe staff could help me. That role is new. Andrea?
Through
that
the
right?
chair, Anderson, the position is held by Angelica in the Legislative and Information Services Department.
Thank you, Sarah.
And can you send that link out, Sarah, please?
With the committee, I'm happy to share contact information for sure.
And the second point, if one wanted to contact a nearby archives, i.e. Pickering, would that go through Angelica or we do it ourselves?
Through the chair, I'm not sure the nature of the request. We would deal specifically here at the town with archives relating to the town of Ajax. There would likely be a separate contact of a municipality, city of Pickering staff that would oversee those materials.
This is material, well, I'm going to talk about it a bit later, but this is material that relates to Ajax, but actually lies in Pickering because, that was the original jurisdiction back in the day.
Okay, well, you could speak with Angelica first and then see where that conversation would progress and if other parties needed to be involved from the city of Pickering as well.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. If you don't mind sending that Angelica information within 24 hours, that would be great. Thanks.
Not a problem.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Sarah. Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, if there's no other committee member questions, I do have one when the opportunity arises.
Yes, I don't see any other hands raised, so go right ahead.
Thank you. Just wanted to throw out to the committee and Sarah for consideration. The Heritage Advisory Committee often participates pre-COVID anyway, in a lot of community groups such as Canada Day and different community events. What do you see as the committee's role in terms of participation and access to the materials moving forward? And what are the thoughts of the committee members?
Certainly, the library is receptive to any type of partnership and regular visits from hopefully our future archivists to this committee. And I think I'll defer to Sarah Dodge, who is a staff member of Ajax Public Library, as she oversees the area related to programs and community events for the library.
So definitely we would be wanting to engage with this committee and to be inviting them as well as consulting with them in terms of the different opportunities that we're offering, and also to update you, to bring regular updates to this committee in terms of events that we want your opinion on, and also to have you attend as members of the Heritage Committee. So it'd be really an interesting working relationship we would have with this committee. That's what I foresee. Sarah, do you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
Thank you. No, I'd absolutely agree. Thank you.
Thank you both. That's all for me, Mr. Chair.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions before we move on to the next agenda item? Okay, so I see no one else. So thank you very much, Sarah, for that informative presentation. And it was certainly thought-provoking, but I'm going to turn over to Mike for points 4.2 to 4.7. And the floor is all yours, Mike.
And good evening, everyone.
Evening.
All right, we have a few items tonight. The first of which is a demolition request for the property at 160 Doughty Road. So 160 Doughty Road is actually located right in the middle of the central Ajax employment area. So these are lands generally bound by the 401 to the north, Bailey to the south, Westmead to the west, and then Harwood to the east. And this particular plot sits right at the northwestern corner of Hunt Street and Doughty Road. It's currently owned by Ajax Auto Wreckers, and anyone who's traveled up Downey Road has probably seen this site here, which is generally what the buildings, there are a number of them on the property. This is the general aesthetic that you get from the buildings on site. So on October 20th, a request was received by staff to sign off on a utility clearance form. A utility clearance form is one of the required pieces of information that comes along with a demolition permit. So whenever I receive one of these, it's indicative of the fact that an owner is looking to demolish a building. Typically, I can sign off on those immediately at the staff level. The only instances where I do not do that is where the property has heritage value. And in this case, the property is included on the town's inventory of non-designated heritage properties. The reason for that is it's assumed to include a number of 1942 storage warehouses that were constructed for Defense Industries Limited. So this is a property that we evaluated as a committee for inclusion on the register some years ago. And according to our evaluation, it did clearly meet the requirements for designation under Ontario Regulation 906. So specifically, the criteria that it hit were that it's a rare, unique, representative, or early example of a style, type, expression, material, or construction method. It has direct associations with a theme, event, belief, person, activity, organization, or institution that's significant to a community. It yields or has the potential to yield information that contributes to an understanding of a community or culture. It demonstrates or reflects the work or ideas of an architect, artist, builder, designer, or theorist who is significant to a community. And lastly, that it is physically, functionally, visually, or historically linked to its surroundings. So essentially, we had this hitting under the the design value criteria, also under the historical value criteria, as well as the contextual value. So when this application was received, I specifically requested for more information based on or indicating which particular buildings would be demolished. And the response I got was in the form of this visual here, which is an aerial view of the site from the north. So the top in this case is actually the south. And it was indicated that all three buildings, as you see circled on this image, would be demolished. Now, we know these buildings to be related to DIL because of the archival information that we have. Part of that is this overlay map. I'm not exactly sure of the date on this, but it's well post DIL. And its purpose was to overlay the location of the DIL buildings, which you see in black, as compared to existing buildings in the town at the time this was produced, which are the light gray color. So in this case, on the property, which is highlighted in red, you can see that there were 2 storage warehouses for inert parts. When you compare this to what's on site today, there's one large southern building. So it's somewhat unclear whether this is components of both buildings with a connecting piece built between them, or whether perhaps the more western building was shifted east to be combined with the other one. But what it also indicates is that the northern building on the site, which is one of the 3 for demolition, was not actually located on this map. So either it is not a building dating back to DIL, or it was a DIL building that was moved here at a later time. So after having looked at some of the archival information that we have, the next step was to get out on site and do a more thorough investigation of what these buildings actually look like and what value they may retain. So this is a quick photo key just showing where I've taken images, some of which I will walk you through during this presentation. So from the street, these buildings are quite unassuming, and the reason for that is largely because there have been significant additions built onto them. So with this building here, essentially this whole front portion, so this is the northern side of the building, is all a concrete block addition. So this isn't original fabric to the historic material, which is housed in behind. The concrete brick addition extends for most of the northern face of the building, at least at the eastern edge. And as you make your way towards the western portion of the site, you can see that the concrete block additions disappear, and you get some wooden frame additions, which are in pretty rough shape. Structurally, they don't look very good. It wasn't until I got out to the site as well that I recognized that there had been demolitions in the past that were not applied for with the town. So at least a portion, and I was told it was about 20 to 30 feet, but the westmost extent of the southern buildings were actually demolished in recent years, leaving some of the interior structural components exposed. And although it looks like some sort of water body here, this is just a flooded out lot more than anything else, with some standing water from the rain we've received over the last month or so. In terms of the building on the north side, very similar structurally to what we see on the south. Very much a utility building, not a lot about the design of this structure. This was constructed as a warehouse. So you wouldn't really expect any design flair or anything for a building that went up, presumably as fast as possible, just to store some of the parts that went in there. This one has a large entrance with a sort of gabled portico feature or extension that runs both north and south of the building. When you get inside of the structures, so this is in the south building, this is the first unit, which is now operating as a battery recycling facility. Very much nondescript inside, very industrial. This would be in the concrete block addition, so there really wouldn't be much expected there in terms of having any significance. When you move towards the back end of the building, you can start to see some of the remnants of its 1942 construction, with the main part being the wooden and metal trusses that really form the majority of the support for this building. Beyond the trusses, there's not much left in the way of original materials. This is the building to the north, and the truss system is actually identical to the building in the south. So it provides some evidence that this was constructed for DIL at the same time as the southern buildings, and it was either just missed on the mapping or it was moved to this location at a later date. So what are our options at this point? Currently, the property has no formal heritage protection. If we do wish to stand in the way of a demolition, the only way to do so is to advance this forward and actually designate it under the Ontario Heritage Act. So as I mentioned before, we know that it meets the criteria for heritage designation. It hits on several of those criteria, but is it actually worth preserving? Could there be a future for this property? As I mentioned already, there's very little original fabric remaining, and the nature of the construction as storage warehouses mean that it would by no means be an easy task to retrofit these buildings and use them for anything, including, habitation or really any activity indoors. These were very, very basic structures that, as I spoke to earlier, were put up very quickly for the nature of storing things. They weren't really meant for anything beyond that. So with that in mind, my position on this is that there's really not much we can do in the way of avoiding the demolition of this property. If we were to move forward with a designation, I would think it would be best to do so with a new use in mind, or else these buildings would be left to slowly decay. So my perspective is that the best we can do, or the most we should hope to do at this point, is to document these buildings well, which I've already done through photography, but also to focus on how we could commemorate these sites. These storage warehouses were at one point located right across the town. We've lost almost all of them. It would be unfortunate to lose more, But at this point, I really don't think there's much we can do in terms of hoping for an adaptive reuse project. So as an alternative, it may be time to start investigating what we can do to commemorate the property. Now, because this is on the heritage inventory of non-designated properties, the committee obviously does get a say in what they believe should happen with these buildings moving forward. And if committee members think that they should be retained and we should move forward with designation, or if there should be a sign off on the demo form. So as I always do, I've put together a draft motion. And again, as I always mention, this is by no means what the committee has to agree to. This is just a sample motion that would support my recommendations for this property. And it reads that staff not pursue a heritage designation for the subject property and instead investigate alternative means for commemorating the property's history. So in this sample motion, I know that I've kind of gone against the best wishes of LIS, who likes to word these motions in the positive. But when it comes to demolition, I have a hard time doing that. I don't generally like putting together motions that support demolition because I don't think that's necessarily what we're doing. Really, we would be not opposing it and allowing to play out. But as I mentioned, this is purely a sample motion. And if the committee wishes to take this a different direction, that's something that we can discuss now.
Yes, go ahead, Pam.
Okay, hi, I have two questions. One is, there's an application to demolish, but what do they plan on doing or building in its place? And the second one is, I believe the building where Service Canada, the yoga studio, and there's something else at the end, just off of Highway 2, behind the old Chrysler plant, was also a storage facility for DIL. And it has been converted into, I've only been in the yoga studio portion, but it has great big open spaces which are conducive to that kind of thing. So that's my two questions.
Okay, can you remind me of the first question? Sorry, I got caught up thinking of the second one.
What they want to demolish, but what is the planned use or whatever?
Right, so I did ask that when I was out on site and wasn't given a clear answer. I think there have been issues with these buildings because they are in such a state of disrepair. And when I was out on site, there's a number of operations that are located in these buildings, some which are, authentic businesses and some which clearly are not. And I think it's become more of a liability issue for the property owner more than anything else. I don't know with certainty that there are plans for replacement buildings or anything like that. If these buildings were to be demolished, there would also have to be a coinciding site plan application. And the reason for that is the portion of the property that's still used by Ajax Auto Wreckers, because of the nature of the use, it has to be screened from public view. These buildings currently provide some of that screening. So if the buildings disappear, that would mean that we would require some other kind of visual obstacle like a fence to go up, which would require site plan approval. Through that process, we would have a means to tie some kind of commemorative element to that project. So as a condition of site plan approval, we could actually get them to put together plaques or something on the site. But going back to your original question, do we know definitively of what will be put there in its place? No, we do not at this point. The second question about the building just north of Bailey, I believe you were referring to. So this is Bailey and trying to think of the name of the.
I can't remember the name of the road, but Service Canada's in there.
Yes.
yoga studio.
Yep, and a furniture store as well.
The furniture store faces Bailey,
Yeah, so that's Bailey and Mackenzie, I believe.
Mackenzie.
If, so I know that the main components of that building come from post-DIL times. There could be a component in there that is, was originally a DIL storage building. If that's the case, that's not clear within our records because we have not noted that building on our inventory of non-designated heritage properties. So that could be something interesting for the committee to look into to get a better sense of where other existing storage buildings might be. Because there's one other one I can think of that's on our inventory. It's on, I believe it's on Mackenzie, just south of Hunt. So just south of the site that we were talking about. There's what looks to be like a concrete building structure there that was also a storage building. So there are a few remnants here and there. I think this is the largest cluster of them. And so, obviously it's always disappointing to lose any building that has any heritage value, but with this being such a heavy industry area as well, I can't imagine how they could be retrofitted for another use.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead, Stephen.
If those buildings are demolished, is there something in place for the earth to be tested for any residuals from DIL?
So in terms of archaeology or in terms of like environmental contaminants?
Well, in both cases.
I think in either case, what we would have to do is tie that to some sort of a development application. So whatever would come next, they'd be required to go through site plan. And as part of that project, we would ask for, archaeology, certainly, and also pretty much any property in that area is going to require a number of environmental studies before clearance would be made for any other use. So it's not something that we would tie specifically to the demolition request, but it is something that would come in time prior to any future redevelopment.
And lastly, I see all the beams in the buildings. If they were being torn down, I was just wondering if there'd be any way they could save those beams and have them used somewhere else for something.
Potentially. I mean, that's something that I think we always want to do when we're looking at demolition. The really difficult component is what would they be used for? And if there was, if the committee had an idea of what they could be used for and we could arrange for storage and that sort of thing, then definitely I think it would be worthwhile coming up with some sort of salvage plan. These trusses aren't made from heavy timbers or anything like that. So they're not big, valuable pieces of wood. They're much less than that. I still think there's a lot of visual interest and it would be interesting even to see, if there are any original windows left in any of the buildings, things like that could be salvaged. Mm-hmm. But again, the question becomes, what do we do with those? We're not in a situation like Pickering, for example, where they have a museum village where they can reuse a lot of those things. But if we have an intended sort of destination or purpose for these, I think that's something we could request, yes.
Okay, I believe Jeff has his hand up first, so we'll go with Jeff and then over to you, Neil.
Mike, this could be way out of our bailiwick, but I'm just wondering if there's a bit of a safety issue for the general public. If these buildings are indeed former DIL, they would be powder saturated or heavy metal saturated and on and on and on. So I know this gets totally out of our heritage bailiwick, but do those buildings pose a safety risk?
I'm not in a position to really comment on that in terms of an informal position. As I mentioned, there are businesses operating out of there that aren't licensed businesses. I'm not sure what kind of oversight is happening right now. And based on even just the appearance of some of the portions of this building, there's no way it's very structurally sound as it is. So I'm not sure what the level of safety risk is, but like I said, this is one of those remnant sites that you tend to see out in more rural areas where it's just evolved over time and there hasn't been a lot of government oversight. It's almost like you've left Ajax when you're walking through the site there. There are all kinds of things going on, and I don't think the town has played a role in many, if any of them. So it's, I'm not in a position to say whether there's any liability there, but yeah, it's definitely something that hasn't had a lot of town oversight in the past.
Okay, go ahead, Neil.
Well, personally, I see little architectural value of anything commercial industrial from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And I quite frankly support your motion to, photograph the heck out of it and get them to finance a plaque and knock the area down. I see it adding very little value to Ajax as it stands as a building.
Thank you, Neil.
Okay, so I'm guessing that Neil is motioning to actually accept the sample motion put forward by Mike.
Mr. Chair, if I could just interject briefly here, could we just have clarification as a friendly amendment? Instead of just listing the subject property, I'm just going to actually insert the address, so that when the motion stands alone, there is reference to the actual property.
Sure. And sorry, Pam's got a question as well. So go ahead, Pam.
Unmute. But I just want to caveat about salvage, because we do have other buildings in the town that maybe any salvage could be used. DIL buildings, I mean, okay?
We've got a motion on the floor.
I'll second.
Okay, Stephen seconds. All in favor? Okay, motion passes. On to 4.3, Mike.
All right, thank you. All right, so a little better news with this update relating to 59 Old Kingston Road and a heritage permit application and grant application made for the property. So 59 Old Kingston Road borders Old Kingston on the north and Kingston Road West on the south. It's within the Pickering Village Heritage Conservation District. And just to provide a little context, this building here is Casa Verde Restaurant. So the building we're speaking to is currently operating as the Pickering Village Pharmacy. So a property that I think probably most of you are aware of if you spent any time in the district. So this building was built in 1890 and known as the Village Store. It includes two distinct masses, as was seen in this prior photo. The one on the east was built as a shop, and then there was actually a residence as the western component, and it was built as a home and a shop for Thomas Dyke, who is a local merchant. Over the years, this building has been home to many different businesses, including a grocery store, a jewelry store, a millinery, which I had to look up, which means a maker of women's hats. And beyond that, obviously, the pharmacy you see today, and probably a number of other uses over the years. This building has been in relatively poor condition. So it's one I've been hounding a little bit in terms of trying to convince to come forward and take advantage of our facade grant program. So a few months ago, we were approached by the owner who is looking to undertake a fairly significant project. This included restoration of all of the wood elements, so sanding and buffing all of the existing wood, replacing anything that's been rotted, filling of dents and gaps, and then caulking any joints, priming with an exterior grade primer, and painting with 2 coats of paint. There's a portion of the building that has eaves and a downspout that would also be replaced. repair of the flat roof section over the store, which has begun leaking over the last year or so. Structural repair of the western section of the building as well. So when this application came in, because there was nothing changing about the building, it was all structural or just general maintenance and repair, I was able to approve it at the staff level, and that heritage permit approval was issued at the end of September. To give you a sense of the state of this building, this is looking up at the east wall. So you can see that it's been a number of years since it had been repainted. Some of the wood beneath the paint was rotted and paint would not hold anymore. Some of the wood's actually still in quite good condition and it's just in need of a little maintenance. All of the wooden features are, you know, they're really showing their age, not just the paint, but dents and nicks. So, you know, the entrance doors, the mullions of the store shop windows, pretty much all of the wooden elements need some kind of treatment. This is an image here showing that the downspouts actually missing from the eaves above, so in obvious need of replacement. This is a shot of the flat roof above the store section. And again, very little maintenance done here over the years, so water has begun to pool in the middle of the roof. And with nowhere else to go, it started to go through the roof, and they're starting to experience some of those issues on the interior of the store. And then lastly, this is the rear section that's in need of a little bit of structural support. So as I mentioned, the permit was issued back at the end of September. In the weeks working up to it, I was working very closely with the owner in order to scope that work and prepare for a grant application. This is what the building looked like in late September. I went by mid-October and they were, you know, well underway with the work. And I have to say, I am quite impressed with the level of detail that the laborers have actually been inspecting the property with. Oftentimes you get contractors saying that they'll preserve as much historic fabric as possible, but then they go in there, they realize how painstaking that work can be, and they just replace it. That was not the case with this building. I didn't get a photo, but on the other side, there were a number of gentlemen, you know, working away with little files, you know, chipping the paint off little piece by piece to retain all the historic fabric possible. So on this photo, you can see the darker wood at the bottom and the darker wood at the top is all the original fabric, which is in a good enough condition to be retained. It's really only that section through the middle that was experiencing quite severe rot and had to be replaced entirely with wood of the same profile. So I went by last week again. They had moved along quite well with this project. We're at the stage of priming. I didn't get the opportunity to go by this week, but they may have already begun with the final paint. I'm not entirely sure. But this project has been moving along very, very well. So that was purely an update. In terms of heritage permit, as I mentioned, it was already issued. A grant was also applied for with this property, similar to the Gordon House, which we spoke about the grant component at our last meeting. So this property, because it has frontage on 2 streets, was also eligible for a $30,000 grant. The value of the work in this case is upwards of $70,000. So they're able to take full advantage of the full $30,000. So any questions on this one before I move along? Nope. Okay. So updates on the Gordon House, which we spoke to at the last meeting. So I'm sure everyone's familiar with this property. We spoke to it in a number of meetings. A few project updates. So the work has been underway now for over a month. If anyone's been by, I know Pam's been by, we had a quick little chat about some of the information she was able to get from the masons on site. And I imagine they're quite excited to talk to people with an interest. So as I said before, I encourage you to go by and have a chat, have a look and see what they're doing there. But the building's entirely covered, at least the front facade, with scaffolding at this point. They've completed the emergency repairs to the parapet. All of the brick replacement that's happening in the lower and mid portions of the building is complete. They've begun brick tinting, and I'm going to talk about all these features in a little more detail when I show some photos. And the facade is currently being repointed, and they're applying the tuck pointing feature that I talked to the committee about at the last meeting. So this was an image just as the scaffolding was going up. You can see the green fabric that's rolled out along the top sections. So that now extends essentially from the top of the scaffolding down to the grade level, and it serves multiple purposes, one of which is an attempt to keep the dust in. This is obviously very, very messy work. And if you walk by, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You'll probably feel the effects of that dust very quickly. But still, this does do a little bit to maintain those types of issues, as well as providing a little bit more comfort for the workers as the weather gets a little colder. So I mentioned the repairs, the emergency repairs to the parapet. This was a photo that I took on the first day that I was out at the site with the masons. And at this point, the scaffolding wasn't up, but one of them actually, pointed upwards. And just from some of the limited vibration and doing work to the bottom of the building, you could see individual masonry units starting to pop from the parapet where the brick is probably in the worst condition. So obviously this is a major component of the project from a liability perspective. Even without the vibrations from the work, there were units like this that had started to come forward already. So it was just a matter of time before they started dropping, and this really needed to be addressed. This is an image showing the state of the bricks down by the grade level. And I think a lot of this damage was sustained during past restoration efforts, likely with sandblasting the building to remove some of the dirt and patina that had built up over time. And as I mentioned before, while sandblasting will make a building look great immediately, it really destroys the nature of those bricks by removing the fired shell and opening up the softer powered insides of the bricks, which are then exposed to the elements and decay quite quickly. So you can see areas in here where entire brick units have spalled so severely they're almost non-existent now. And this is right across the face of the facade. You can also see a lot of efflorescence, which is this white staining, which is an indication that water is getting in behind the masonry. And then as it comes forward, it brings out some of those mineral salts that are held within and leaves that stain as it evaporates. So this is what it looked like before. And most of the lower portion of the building right up to this banding here has been entirely rebuilt now. So this is one of the examples of the arches that's been replaced. The sawtooth component has also been replaced. All of these bricks, as I mentioned at the last meeting, have been imported from overseas, and they are as close a match in terms of materiality, but also size that's available on the market. So even still, they are a little bit smaller than the original bricks. So how they're compensating for that is having mortar joints that are a little bit bigger, just so it can take up some of that extra space. I should also point out that this isn't by any means the way the finished product will look. This is covered with all kinds of dust, obviously not cleaned prior to me stepping forward and taking a photo. And at this point, the repointing had not been done either to kind of add some of those finishing touches. This is an image of the east wall of the building, and I thought it was quite a good introduction to what we're going to talk about next, which is brick tinting. Because what you have is when you're making repairs to a building of this nature with bricks that are, 120, 130 years old, even in this case, I think closer to 140 years old, it's going to be very, very difficult to match brick exactly. So I believe this brick was installed probably 30 or 40 years ago during the first significant overhaul or restoration of this building. And even despite best efforts to find materials that are well matched, you can see that they're not an exact match. And this is after 30 or 40 years of weathering. So you would expect that what we see today is far less in terms of the drastic contrast in these materials than what you would have seen at the time that they were first installed. So anytime we're undergoing a significant project like this, there's a lot of consideration of how do we make the new match the old? And the new trend with these restoration projects is to tint the bricks. So what you can see with this image is everything beneath this yellow band has been tinted. And oftentimes it's the new material that's tinted to match the old. In this case, because the new bricks were a bit darker than the historic bricks, it's gone the other way. So they've tinted the old bricks to match the new. Most of what you see above the banding here hasn't been tinted. So you see it's got a lot of character, a lot of variations in terms of the coloring of the material. You lose that when you stain a brick. So that's not an ideal result, but what it does is it makes the project more cohesive in terms of making sure everything matches. Now, over time, this tinting will start to dissipate a little bit, and you will get some of the original character back to the brick. By that time, all of the new brick will probably have aged a little as well, so you're going to have more of a uniform composure. Now, what we can also see here is the tuck pointing that they've done. So this is just a small area. So on this photo, you can see it down here by the window. They did this specifically for us, just so I can provide an update to the committee to show them what the finished product would look like. So as I mentioned during our last meeting, the mortar isn't a gray mortar as you would typically see. It's closer in color to the brick unit itself. And the intention with that is to help blend the rough edges of the brick. And so our eye is drawn to this very straight raised ribbon, which has been tinted white. So this treatment is going to be applied to the entire facade. And what it really should do is make all those joints pop, make all the individual brick units look a little more formal and like they're bricks of a bit higher quality. So any questions on that one?
Yes, go ahead, Pam.
Sorry. Yes, I was over there and beautiful job, beautiful. What he told me though is that because the building was sandblasted, that tinting includes a sealant for the bricks that were sandblasted but are not being replaced to seal them basically. And I did have one question. I believe, and I could be wrong, in historical pictures, the parapet has a dome in the middle over where the main entrance was, I believe. And I think it had some more decorative brick in it. And I just wondered if that was going to be reconstructed.
So that isn't going to be part of the project. There is a second phase, which could happen next year or some year after, where elements of that are going to be restored. There was a large wooden cornice that extended across the entire front. That will be introduced again. So the value of that is when you look at the top of the building right now, it's flush running all the way down. So any water that does come off the top of the roof is dripping directly down and is impacting these bricks. The purpose of the cornice is it will project a couple feet out from the building. Any water being shed from the roof is going to drip off the edge of the cornice and won't touch the building face at all. So Pam, I think I sent a link to the committee's last meeting. If you look at that video on YouTube, you'll see the slides that I showed last time, which demonstrate exactly what they'll be restoring. And the intention is, in the longer range future, if the owner wants to restore the more decorative parapets and gables that were on the building, it'll be ready to do so because it'll have everything else built right up to that cornice. Any other questions?
Yes, Neil's got a question. Go ahead, Neil.
Hi, Michael. It's obviously going to look a really beautiful renovated building when it's finished, but there's one incongruous element there, and that's that Smile Line sign. Is that still going to be there?
That will be there, yes.
Well, that is a great shame.
Yeah, so that sign is a relatively new sign. It did come forward to the committee just a couple of years ago, I believe. Were you on the committee at the time that came forward, Neil?
No, I don't remember that at all.
Okay, it did come forward, and it was actually one that I recommended approval, and that was largely because although it is made from modern materials, it has a very light touch on the building. So most times you have a business in a building like this, they want to put up a huge boxy sign on the front. And we really wanted to avoid that in this case because it would cover up a lot of the historical fabric. So we thought that Smile Line, or I thought that Smile Line sign was actually a nice touch because it allows you to see almost all the historic fabric, and the only impact it has is through the bolts, which has gone through the mortar joints. So there's no impact to the historic material either.
It's just a visual, well, I don't know, a non-entity. It just takes away a bit.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because there are a number of different tenants in this building, and they don't receive the same sign treatment as Smile Line. And the reason for that is the owners of Smile Line are the owners of this building. So they were most concerned with getting their own business, I think, advertised on the front. So that was somewhat of a concession, I think, that we were willing to make in order to support their business as owners of this building.
I understand, and I'll leave it at that.
All right.
Okay, any other questions on that one? I don't see any, Mike, so we can move on to the next one.
All right, so a quick update on the Signs of Life mural project, which was also discussed at the last meeting. So you'll remember that there were two sites that were being considered for this project, one right at the corner of Church and Kingston Road, which is 2 Old Kingston, and then another towards the western edge of the district at 90 Old Kingston Road. This is the 2 Kingston Road location. This is the wall where the mural would be featured. And then this was the concept that had been provided to us by Signs of Life. And again, I'll mention that, none of the concepts I show here are actually what's being proposed. It was just to give a sense of how the mural could fit onto the building. The second site was 90 Old Kingston Road, with this being the wall that the mural would go on, and this being the concept for that wall. And at the time, a motion was made for the HAC to support the installation of a mural in the Pickering Village HCD, subject to having an opportunity to comment on the final design. So the updates immediately following that meeting, the next week, there was a meeting of the General Government Committee where Council heard a presentation on this item. and council made a motion to support the mural at 2 Old Kingston Road, which is the location right at the corner of Kingston and Church. To date, we've had the town's recreation department draft a funding agreement. And the final design is actually to include concepts from both murals. So originally it was presented as number 2 Old Kingston, having somewhat of a welcome to Pickering Village mural, and the other building having some indigenous iconography to reflect the indigenous history of the area. Well, the idea now is to take both of those and try to combine those concepts into the one mural on 2 Old Kingston. So Signs of Life have secured 2 artists to work on this project. The artists go by the name Mostly Letters, which is an artist that focuses a lot on word art. And then there's Johnny13, who specializes in Indigenous art. And he is a member of the Scugog Island First Nation. So the intention is to have this project completed before year end. At this point, we don't have any draft design. So we're getting quite tight in terms of the timeline for this project. It only takes a couple days to install, but obviously we've made a motion saying that we would like to be part of the commenting process on the design. Beyond that, they have to have a heritage permit to move forward with this work. So it has to come forward in a formal way. This may be a scenario where we have to get input from the committee based on email or based on some kind of emergency meeting, based on when this information actually comes forward. So I'll keep the committee up to date on that. In the meantime, I just wanted to provide a couple of examples of the works of the artists that have been selected. So this is a project by Mostly Letters, showing exactly that these messages are really the focus of his work. And this is a work, I believe, in the interior of a school in Uxbridge by Johnny13, showing some sort of Indigenous themes through his art. So I think the artists are obviously quite talented. I think it'll be quite interesting to see what they come up with for a concept for this building. And as I said, I will bring that forward to the committee when the time arises. Any comments on that one? Nothing?
Don't see any.
All right, so we'll move on to the next one. So again, another follow-up from the last meeting. And you'll remember that I took a few moments at the last meeting to just talk about some of the efforts from Clarington and how proactive they've been in dealing with the issue of heritage and insurance that we're seeing right across the province. So to recap that, in a number of municipalities lately, they've been facing requests to de-designate or repeal designation bylaws because they're having issues getting insurance. Now, this shouldn't be an issue. Its heritage status has nothing to do with insurance, yet this is something that we're seeing time and time again in other communities right across the province. Unfortunately, this has now become a local issue as well. So back in September, I was contacted by the owner of 504 Kingston Road West, which is known as the Richardson House and is a property that's designated under Part 4. And this is a house that was built back in 1890. It was also home to another fairly significant family in the history of Ajax, the Ruddys. And as I mentioned, this was designated back in 2001 for its architectural, historical, and contextual value. So on the 16th of September, I was contacted by the owner, and he had said that his insurance had come due and he went to renew it. And the quote that he was given was 5 times higher than what he had paid during his last term. I asked specifically what the reasons were for that, and he expressed that his insurance provider isn't in the business of insuring heritage properties. And if they do, they need to make it worth their while by charging these exorbitant rates. So as I mentioned, any technical information that you come across is that heritage status doesn't play into insurance rates. Older homes tend to have higher insurance rates because they inherently have more risk. There's nothing in a designation bylaw that would require a building to be reconstructed exactly as it is if it was lost. In fact, that's a general premise of full value insurance coverage. You get rebuilt what is lost. So it has nothing to do with heritage designation. It has everything to do with the way that insurance works. And then, as I mentioned, the inherent risk of an older property. So this property has had a number of upgrades and really shouldn't represent much of a risk, yet the owner was being charged, as I said, 5 times higher the rate than the last term. So his request specifically when he contacted me was, how do I move forward with repealing the designation bylaw? Well, obviously that's not something we want to do. So my advice was to first reach out to a number of different insurers, try to find one that's a little more heritage friendly and see what kind of rates you can get from them. So he's been going through that process for the last month and a half, hasn't had any luck so far. So my next request was, if you can't find somebody that will, has a specialty in terms of insuring heritage buildings, make sure you get a quote for an undesignated heritage building. Because if the case truly is that the rate is going up because it's an old building, there's no sense in us de-designating it. So right now we're still in the stage where he's collecting information. He's going to get back to me probably in the next month or so when he has more information. But this item was really, more than anything else, just to provide an update to the committee to say, this trend is starting to hit us now as well. And this is the first property where this has become an issue. I don't imagine it'll be the last. So we will have to think, depending on how this plays out, we could be in a position where we start seeing property owners trying to de-designate their property. So that's not something I want to see. I don't imagine it's anything committee members want to see. So at this point, I'm still hopeful we'll be able to find some insurance providers that can provide a reasonable rate for homeowners and building owners in Ajax. Any questions on this one?
Go ahead, Stephen.
I know that the people that bought the Westland house had a hard time getting insurance for their house too. It was like way higher than the actual house was, should have been. And that house was totally rebuilt up to today's standards.
Yeah, so that, as we discussed at the last meeting, that's a perfect example of the fact that some insurance providers are just not insuring heritage properties. There's not necessarily any merit behind what they're doing, but it's become part of their corporate policies. So the West Glen House is a great example because, as you said, it's pretty much a new house, other than some of the exterior elements. So there is no reason that insurance should be that high for that property. All right. No other questions?
Mike and Mr. Chair, just before we move on to the next item, I've been notified that Councillor Khan has to duck out a little bit earlier this evening. So with your permission, if we might be able to bump up his council report item.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Sorry to do this, but I did have to leave, and I see we're going to go on a bit later tonight. So I have many updates. I'm just going to give you a few important ones. I did promise at the last meeting that we were going to install a flag for the First Nations in front of Town Hall, a 4th flagpole, and I'm proud to say that we have done that, and we did hoist that flag in October. So very, very good news, very Ajax proud, I'd say. Second part we broke ground on a new H&M store. It's an Omni Center. It's right beside the new Amazon on Salem. And that's another massive building with many more jobs to come. So we broke ground. An Omni store is a center is somewhere you can do online shopping, and there is a brick and mortar aspect to it. You can even go into that store and do online shopping at the brick and mortar place. So many more jobs to come. Third, we have a new flea market in Ajax, Ajax's own flea market. It's at the previous Rona Lansing site on Notion Road. It's a bit smaller than the Pickering one, but it's not on conservative, it's not on wetlands, it's on good property, and we have about 150 vendors that are out there, so we should support them. They seem to be doing well, and it's pretty nice. And last but not least, we did install 25 new banners to honor our veterans along Harwood through Bailey up to Highway 401, and it's going to be there for a while, honoring our veterans for the HMS Ajax. And it's really, really nice things. And you drive down from Town Hall down Harwood, you'll see the banners of our veterans that we honor. So thank you for indulging me. I apologize for this interruption in the meeting, but thank you for letting me do this. But it's really important. I want to share this great news with you guys. And I did ask Ms. Moore if I can have an update on what's it called, the annual report to council. So if I can get an update on what's happening with that, so I can support you in any way I can. Is that okay? All right.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and you guys have a great night, okay?
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor Khan.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night.
So with that, we'll go back to Mike for item 4.7 on the agenda. Sorry, go ahead, Neil.
Just to point back to Mike on that insurance, I had a quick look online, and there's a specialist company in Toronto called Square One that, that's, and then the Insurance Bureau of Canada also has a specialized page on heritage properties. So there's information out there.
Yeah, all that information has already been provided to the owner. And it's funny because we're getting a bit of competing messaging from the Insurance Bureau of Canada. They've always been an advocate for heritage, and they've come out to a number of conferences and given the message that I delivered here, that heritage status shouldn't impact insurance rates. However, it's happening. So part of the Clarington motion was to get some clarity on that and to get the government at the provincial level to step in and make some kind of active attempt to correct these policies within the individual insurance providers, which I think is going to be key in terms of preventing this from continuing to happen. So I've just got another couple items, very, very quick updates. The first is just on the Elizabeth Street Cemetery erosion control. We mentioned this one at the last meeting. On screen here is just an image of the final notice that went out, was delivered a few weeks back to all of the houses that back onto the ravine and those directly across from the cemetery, talking about the dangers of dumping on the slope. It doesn't look like the best job here. Looks a little sloppy, but the Pickering Beach Schoolhouse plaque has been reinstalled on the rock that's there. This image was sent to me by operations immediately after installation. So obviously the mortar that was used here is still quite wet and really stands out. I'm hoping, I haven't been by myself, but I'm hoping that as that's dried, it's started to match the stone a little more. Nonetheless, it's been a long time coming, and thank you to Neil for the push, but that is back up where it should be. I have reached out to our plaque provider to get the designation plaque for 775 Kingston Road East. So in the coming months, I think we're probably going to have to reopen this up. You'll remember a few years ago that this first came forward to us as a property standards issue, and we were hesitant to act on that because we didn't want to promote any modifications to this property that would detract from its heritage attributes. Now that the property is fully designated, we can re-engage in that discussion. But the main thing here is that we have the designation marker that will be presented to the property owners once it is received. Then the last update relates to 599 Kingston Road West. So this is a rendering of the proposed building at the southeast corner of Church and Kingston Road. As you can see from the image here, workers are on site and construction has begun on that. So there are a few issues that the town's working through at the present time, but good to see some movement on that project. I think that'll be quite a significant project for Pickering Village. It'll introduce 60 new rental apartments as well as some ground level retail to the village.
Hope their setback from the Kingston Road is enough. They stayed within what they were supposed to.
They did, yeah. So we had to take 8 meters of their, or well, not we, but the region took 8 meters of their frontage to accommodate the transit project that'll be running through Kingston Road. So all of that's been accommodated in their plans. All right, so that's it from me unless there are any questions.
I do not see any questions, so thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay, on to item 4.8, the annual report to council. Sarah, did you want to lead off on that, or did you want me to talk about it?
Through the chair, it's really up to yourself and committee at this point. We do have a deadline to provide any presentation materials to Legislative and Information Services the Friday prior to the council meeting date. So I did circulate when last month's meeting was canceled, the previous year's presentation template, and had solicited participation from the group regarding suggestions for content for this year. I didn't receive anything directly, so I know we wanted to allocate some time on the agenda today in order for Mike and Anderson to seek some direction for how the presentation should be crafted and what the committee would like to have represented in their report.
Right. Given that we didn't actually get anything, and I believe our deadline is the 19th to provide a presentation to them for the council meeting, that's it's the 22nd, correct, Sarah?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. I'm in favor of keeping the same format we had previously and just updating the contents of it to reflect what we've been up to over the last couple of years. Obviously, our presence has not been as much in the community, given that most things were moved to virtual and or drive-by type events. However, I mean, the committee has been very active in terms of everything that's going on. Things like the Heritage Minute video and the scenes from the village videos were really positive aspect that came out of everything being virtual and online. So I think that could definitely be included on there. Does anyone have any input on that in terms of what they would like to see in the presentation? Yes, go ahead, Jeff.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I think reflecting what you just said, I think it's not necessary to reinvent the wheel. Using our last report could be a great template, with how to structure what you're up to. And I agree with the dropping in of some of the video projects we've been doing. That's a great idea. So I think previous reports have just reflected the report before them. Is that sort of helpful at all?
Yes. However, in terms of content, I know that
Yes.
I sent Sarah a few items. And I'm trying to find it in my email right now to sort of bring them back up. But I think we can include things like the West Glen property tour that we had all done post reconstruction / restoration as one of it. The plaque for Daniel Palmer, the chiropractic guy, is another one that happened in the past year. There was also the plaque for the West Glen house that we approved. There was the reattaching of the plaque that Mike just mentioned at the Pickering Beach School. I think there was a cemetery plaque that we also dealt with, or it sort of came up. The one on
Through the
Notion
chair,
Road.
there's been the ongoing issue regarding the erosion of the cemetery.
Right.
And how
okay.
there's been that resource developed, regarding the illegal dumping.
Right.
I guess, sorry, Pam, go ahead.
Sorry,
Pam.
we reviewed the, regarding the cemetery that is behind the new construction beside Walmart, right?
Yes,
That's
we did.
cemetery.
It did come forward to us as well, and yeah, so we did review that. So I think what we could do is we could list some of the various items that we had input on, which I can comb through some of the old minutes and things like that from the past year. There shouldn't be too many of them because we didn't meet for 2 months of the summer, and then there was a couple of meetings canceled because of not enough content. So I don't know. So my quick math says that there's only about 6 to 8 meetings that I got to go back and rehash through. But we can go through all of those. And if Pam and Jeff, since you guys were really leading the way on the Heritage Minutes, if you guys could maybe work on some content for one of the slides on that, because I think that's one of the main content slides in the council report. I think all the other items are more administrative / routine business, where the Heritage Minute video and the Scenes from the Village videos were sort of new initiatives that this committee came up with over the last year. And I think I want to highlight those because they're value add from the committee. So if you guys could just provide a little more content on what the process is going into it, maybe how the properties are selected and things like that, and we can sort of craft the wording as we go along with it, but get something going. That would be awesome.
Okay. We can, I'm sure Pam and I can do that. And I guess while we're talking about it, this is very much we should reassure council that we're still going, COVID or not, the work's getting done. And I think we've been more efficient in the electronic format than we have been in person. So we should, if we can't, this is something I'm dreaming up right now, but maybe we'll show some screenshots of this committee in action, just to show the councilors that we're very much an active committee, still going, COVID or not.
Good idea.
Right. And one of the things that I could draw attention to is just like the regular attendance of, the majority of the committee has been here for every single meeting. Like there haven't been very many meetings missed. Everyone's been on camera, everyone's been participative. So definitely that'll be highlighted in it. But if I could just kind of put a deadline to getting some info on the Heritage Minutes videos, is the 15th of November asking too much? And that way it gives Sarah and I about 4 days to sort of, edit and integrate it into the presentation. Yes, Pam.
Jeff, I can rough something out in terms of the information for slide. I can send that to you tomorrow, and then we just need to decide visuals to go with it.
Anderson,
Okay. Yes, Stephen.
I think a couple of the really big highlights would be ones that Michael brought forward today from the Pickering Village. 59 Kingston Road getting redone, and
right.
Those should be highlighted. The amount of work going in to have those places restored.
Yes, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, and so any resources that are required from me in terms of photos or previous slides from presentations, anything like that, just send me an email and I'm happy to provide that to anyone looking for it.
And Anderson,
Right.
it might be an idea, just for Pam and Jeff's sake, instead of doing some visuals for the video project component, they're short enough. Why don't we show the videos to date as part of the presentation? Because not
Sure.
all of council may have had the opportunity to see them yet. And I think it might be nice to do like a little premiere of the series that you've created.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and we could definitely take one of the videos. I'll leave it to you guys to recommend which one you think is like, you know, a little bit better to go. I think I think the first one was really well done, but the St. Francis Center one might just be sort of the stronger video because of the visuals that are incorporated in that video. So I'll leave it to you guys to recommend one. But
That's
that
third one yet. Third one is coming, so
It's coming up.
yeah, it's coming
No,
up.
and-
And
yeah, and the thing is, like, I mean, I don't want to put you guys on the spot to rush that one along, but you know, I thought the St. Francis Center video was probably a good one that we can share there. So yeah, absolutely, we can share that, and you know, things like the items that Mike brought up today with some of the more like, you know, major or large scale projects, I can highlight as part of what the committee has had input on, together with everything else, and then I'll probably do the plaques all on one slide type of thing and say, you know, these are the plaques that we did in the last year, and that should take up the 5 minutes or so that I get to speak to council. And the other thing was, if anyone else would like to join me and be a part of that, it'd be nice to get more than one face on there, as well as, I know that those council meetings sort of run pretty long. Sarah, do we know when we get to talk, or is it just whenever it comes up?
Great question, Mr. Chair. So delegations are typically placed first on the council agenda after their administrative business, like their minutes and their call to order. Dependent on how many other requests to speak before council have been received, there might be some juggling.
Right.
By the Tuesday of that week that the presentation is due, the agenda will be released, so we'll have a much better idea of where we are on the agenda, so I can provide some additional timing considerations.
As long as it's earlier, I'm good with that, just because I've got a second kid in the house and my evenings kind of get hairy. So
Yes, so the meeting would be a 7 p.m. start. So all going well, you should be within the first half hour of the meeting. But now that I've said that, you never know. So once the agenda has been released, and I'll speak with Leslie, who coordinates that, just to see where
Right.
we can fall on that agenda.
yeah, and once again, like, I would love to have every single one of you guys join me on that. But you know, whoever can, if you make sure that I know about it, I'll draw attention to the fact that there are other committee members present as well for that. And you know, it'll just add into what Jeff was saying about, you know, the committee has still been very active and doing a lot during this time. So so we can keep that in there. If there's no further questions, I think we're safe to move on to the aforementioned Heritage Minute video, and so I'll turn over to Pam and Jeff for that one.
Sorry, Pam and Jeff, before you start, I just wanted to know who's going first so I can pull up the correct materials. Did Pam want to go first with the agenda content, or did you want me to pull up the video?
Jeff, I think we do the video and then the information. And you don't really need to show that document I sent you, Sarah, because I think I can just talk to it. And
Okay.
So if we show the video first, and then my part is what next.
Okay, bear with me here.
Good, Jeff, with that?
Yes, just this is a not quite final cut, so there's going to be some improvements made, but here's what we have so far.
Can everybody see this, a video pane on their screen? Yes? Okay, fingers crossed.
This is an Ajax Heritage Minute. History is everywhere in our town, and this stop is the Old Post Inn, the oldest building in Ajax. Built in 1815 by George Washington Post as a stagecoach stop and tavern, it is on Kingston Road, which was the most important east-west route in the pioneer days. Like most inns at the time, the main floor had a parlor, dining room, men-only tap room, and a cooking wing at the rear. Upstairs, 6 bedrooms and a large ballroom for meetings and additional sleeping quarters. 2 narrow bedrooms are at the far end of the ballroom, a very unusual feature. Built to last, it is Loyalist neoclassical in style. The bricks came from Crothers Creek clay, and local trees were squared for timber. The symmetrical front facade has a decorative front entrance with fanlight transom and side lights, an impressive main entrance for the time. Typical of inns are the half-circle lights in the gable ends. This historic inn has kept the post name for over 200 years. A prominent local family, George Washington Post's brother, built the Post Manor at Brock Road and Kingston Road in Pickering, and his son built the house on Post Hill, west of Ajax Loblaws Supercentre. In 2005, the Old Post Inn was purchased by Runnymede Development and moved to the west. In 2010, restoration began. Aluminum cladding was removed, the decorative main entrance was revealed and repaired, the red brick facade exposed and restored, and decades of alterations to the original floor plan reversed. The original bake oven, folding partitions in the ballroom, and dining room dish corner cabinet remain. The oldest building in Ajax, the Old Post Inn, was an impressive building at the time, when much of the land was covered in forest and Kingston Road resembled a muddy path.
So, as you can see, there's a few glitchy spots, the opening and closing shots, which we'll shoot with another camera so we get better definition. And beyond that, some other small changes we'll make, but that's what we've got going so far. And happy to show it to you. Go ahead, Pam.
Well, do we get any feedback on that though? I mean, any concerns? Yes, Mike?
Go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say at the beginning, there was a few images with that I was really interested in, and as soon as I saw them, we flipped to the next one. So if there's any way to slow down some of those near the beginning, I think that's it's always good to give them kind of at least 3 to 5 seconds so you can actually hone in on what you're looking at before it shifts gears. Although it's great though, and I think this to me is the most interesting story that we can tell visually. We have so many great photos from the before as well as the during the restoration and the after. It's great to kind of see how that all comes together.
Good. Well, we can make changes and let it breathe. That's sort of what I hear from you. Just let things flow a little bit longer. And the beauty of video is it's infinitely reconfigurable. So thanks for the feedback. And so we'll let you know when the final cut is ready to be submitted. And of course, we'll submit it to the committee first because this is something we're working on together.
Sorry, Bruce had a question as well. Go ahead, Bruce.
It's more of a comment. I really liked how the other couple buildings that were related to this was added to it. And I think it was a great job. I give it a double thumbs up. Good work.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
That's good. So we just wanted to pass, consult with the committee about our next steps and what our possible next projects would be. And just to go back to what the objective of this was. It's a 1 or 2 minute visual story which builds awareness and focuses on specific founding family, heritage buildings, cemetery, or a significant site within the town of Ajax. And our criteria for selection, which this will all be part of what we'll give you, Anderson, for the presentation to council, is that there's enough historical information to work with, the location consistent with being recognized by the general public, and the other being recognizable, that it hasn't been altered too much. So we had originally had a number of buildings that were just kind of presented, or sites, and our discussion right now is more on 2. One is to do something around the DIL, including some of the DIL buildings that still exist, and maybe include something about the naming of the streets in the town. And the other is the Peak Greenlaw Family Cemetery. So we think just by, Neil did a little bit of quick research on that one. And we think that's a pretty, something that we have enough information, it could be a quick video. And the other being something on the DIL. There are other buildings, but we'll eventually get there. But that's, we just wanted to present that for feedback.
Just to add to that, on the cemetery, most of the text information is available, I think, in the Town of Ajax book, and on the plaque that's already down at Simcoe Point. But I came across the mother load of photos today, and that's in the Pickering archives. So that's why I asked the question before. It's all in one PDF, so I'll get hold of them hopefully. There are some in Ajax, but Pickering, given its previous jurisdiction over the area, has a lot as well. But I think it's a tighter, it should be a fairly quick job to do that video after the last one's finished. So I'll continue with that. And once I get the information from Pickering, Pam, I'll pass it on to you. But who can say when I would get it? I'll try my best.
That would be great. The other thing I was going to mention, sorry, Bethany, is I have a map that was given to me, a copy of a map which shows William Peak's log cabin on the site.
The other thing I wanted to bring up was Brenda and I'm not sure who it was. Was it you, Paul, that was with us, or? But anyway, that was part of the historical or the spirit walk down at the lake, this cemetery. We did a lot of research on that. So there's some sort of dialogue and so on that one of the ghosts used about that. And there, we brought up the fact that there were 3 sailors that washed up on shore. Nobody knew who they were, but they were buried in there as well. So there's all sorts of information in that if we can find that dialogue. I don't know who would have it now.
I will have to look, because I did that walk. So
down at the lake?
Pardon?
The one down at the lake?
The one by the lake in the rain, yes. It's a lovely rainy night.
Yeah, it was, but we did a lot of research on that cemetery, yes. So
I'll see if I can find that material.
I might have something, but I've changed computers since then, so I've probably lost it. So
I'm a bit old school, so I have hard copy of a lot of stuff.
just to butt in, what Pickering has is this, which is a layout of within the cemetery itself, if you can see that.
I've got that. Yeah, that came from the Greenlaw Family Bible.
Good.
And actually by then it was Puckrin. It was the Puckrins were maintaining that. But anyway, it sounds like there's a fair bit of information that we can get on that. And then wondering about kind of starting something around DIL at, kind of at the same time. If there's information that people can send my way, I can start putting some kind of framework together.
Isn't that your area of expertise, Stephen? DIL?
Yeah, kind of. I'll send you what I can.
Okay. Okay, so any other, everyone's fine with those 2 suggestions for now?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
I guess if I can throw it in there, if when you are making contributions to us, make sure it's in the public domain or you've got something you can attribute it to, because because of copyright laws. So obviously town stuff we can use because it's town stuff, but if it comes from a book, we'll need to know what book it is. So thanks in advance for finding stuff, but make sure you attribute it. Thank you.
Just a note, I was at the cycle for Pickering Village at the Heritage, at the Quaker Meeting House. And we showed our video all the time we were there. And I heard that we're going to be shown at the St. Francis Center for openings when they start showing different events there again.
Great,
So we're getting it shown in the town.
great.
Any other questions or comments? Nope. Okay, next item on the agenda is correspondence. We actually have none. So we're just gonna move right along. The update from council was previously done by Councillor Khan, so we can move past that one. We're on to other business. Anyone have any other business? Yes, Mike.
Just a quick one. I received a request today from Robert Gruber in Recreation to ask the committee about the Ajax Community Awards, and specifically if there was any individual or any business or anyone in town that the committee thought was deserving of being recognized. So if anyone does have any ideas of an individual or business deserving recognition, send me an email and we can see what we can do.
Mike, through the chair, is there any consideration, I don't know if it would be eligible or a conflict, for any of the businesses in the village that stepped forward and proactively wanted to do any repairs or retrofits to their property?
Potentially, I mean, so that was something I spoke to Robert about for the Gordon House, because the masonry project there is such a large project compared to what the other projects we've seen in the village. I thought they would be a great candidate, but it does seem a little premature given that the restoration's still happening. So I think that one would be more appropriate at a later date. In terms of other businesses that have stepped forward, it's hard to choose one that sort of is more deserving than the other. So I'd hate to kind of recognize one without the others. And that leads me to say at this point, there's nothing obvious that is a good candidate in my mind.
Right. Just a thought.
Yep, no, it's a good one.
For the Heritage one, we should go back to, I can't remember the fellow's name, the chiropractor that found out all the information on D.D. Palmer.
That's a good idea.
Dr. Marchman?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I quite like that idea. I mean, that event was largely a success based on his contributions. And I remember at the time wishing there was more we could do to thank him for all of his work on that. Perhaps this is the venue for that. I really like that idea. What other committee members think?
I would support that.
Okay.
I see a lot of heads nodding yes as well. So for anyone that's on mute, I'm speaking for you right now and saying that you support it.
Yes, please.
Okay, all right. I will definitely take steps. I'll put his name forward and I'll work directly with Robert. So
Sorry,
thank
Mike.
you, Stephen. That was
Just to clarify, we as staff actually can't. So how we do this through the Accessibility Advisory Committee is that a nomination has to come on behalf of the advisory committee itself with a mover and a seconder listed as the two nominees. And then we contact the nominee, as the two nominators. And then we contact the nominee and get their permission to stand for nomination. And then there's a brief online form we have to complete before Friday.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So what we would need, the next step would be a formal motion from the committee, just to have that on record that the committee is in full support of such. And then the mover and the seconder normally stand as the two nominators. And then you and I as staff behind the scenes can help facilitate the completion of the form and contact the nominee to make sure that they're okay with it. And then if there's anyone from the committee that would like to participate in creating that summary of the reasons why the individual would be worthy of nomination, that's the body of the text we would need for the application form.
Yes, Pam.
Quick question, Sarah. So if, like last year, I sat on that selection committee, so I would assume then, and Paul did too, and if we are going to sit on that committee again, I guess we have to abstain from voting, right?
So great question. Thank you for bringing that up. If you are a nominator, you cannot sit on the selection committee. So just make sure you're not the mover or the seconder this evening if that's something of interest to you. If you are sitting on the selection committee, you're still eligible to participate. You just have to abstain for the category in which you were associated with the nomination. So for the Heritage Award, if the committee is putting forward a nomination because you're a member, you would have to abstain from voting on that particular award category only.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So in that case, I guess we need a motion to nominate sorry, what was his name again, Sarah?
Jeremy Barchman.
Right. So Jeremy Barchman for the Heritage Award, Heritage Community Award. Do we have someone who would motion that nomination?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Stephen, thank you. And someone who would second it. Okay, Neil, perfect. All in favor? Okay, the motion carries. Any other business items? No? Okay, in that case, that concludes our meeting. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting, please? Pam, someone who seconded? Beverly, thank you. All in favor? Perfect. So meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, December 1st, 2021. And that is also being scheduled as an electronic meeting at this time.